Hollow Knight is a 2017 Metroidvania developed and published by small Australian indie developer Team Cherry, which consisted of three people: Ari Gibson, the artist and designer, William Pellin, the programmer and designer, and Jack Vine, another programmer. The composer for the music is Christopher Larkin, who helped Team Cherry make a soundtrack for the game. Development for the game was partially funded through a crowdfunding campaign that raised over 57,000 in Australian currency by the end of 2014. It was released for the Linux, Mac OS, and Windows in 2017, for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One in 2018, and for Nintendo Switch 2, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S in 2026. Hollow Knight's PC, Mac, and Linux release passed the 1 million units sold threshold the day before the Switch launch, which is a huge milestone that took 15 months to reach. In just its first 2 weeks on Switch, Hollow Knight sold more than 250,000 copies, adding Team Cherry to the growing list of indie developers finding success on Nintendo's handheld. The concept behind Hollow Knight was conceived in 2013 in the Ludum Dare Game Jam. Team Cherry wanted to create a game inspired by older platformers that replicated the explorational aspects of its influences. Influences for the game include Fox Undo, Metroid, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link, and Mega Man X. Team Cherry noted that Hallownest was in some ways the inverse of the world tree setting in Fox Undo. The team wanted to replicate the sense of wonder and discovery of games from their childhood, in which there could be any crazy secret or weird creature. Believing that control of the character was most important for the player's enjoyment of the game, the developers based the player's movement on Mega Man X. They gave the character no acceleration when moving horizontally, as well as a large amount of aerial control and the ability to interrupt one's jump with a dash. This was meant to make the player feel that any hit they took could have been avoided right up until the last second. To create the game's art, Gibson's hand-drawn sketches were scanned directly into the game engine, creating a vivid sense of place. Developers decided to keep it simple in order to prevent the development time from becoming extremely protracted. The complexity of the world was based on Metroid, which allowed players to become disoriented and lost, focusing on the enjoyment of finding one's way. Only basic signs are placed throughout the world to direct players to important locations. The largest design challenge was creating the mapping system, and finding a balance between not divulging the world's secrets while not being too player-unfriendly. Hollow Knight sticks to many of the cultural production values that defined games during the 2010s decade. Indie development saw significant growth during this period as developers began rebelling against corporate or big businesses through highly creative and artistic games. Kickstarter funding for the game is one example of developers beginning to crowdsource funds, instead of taking money from large publishers. This financial shift allowed for more risky game development, where storytelling and creating memorable environments took precedent over sales. Graphically speaking, Hollow Knight is another example of indie developers moving away from hyperrealism, featuring intricate hand-drawn pixels. However, the environments lean towards a darker undertone while the character designs are softer and simpler, creating a cohesive and depressive tone. Similar to this moodiness was a rise in indie games taking artistic license with their games' graphical identities. Themes of representation also correlate with Hollow Knight. As the gaming industry began shifting towards more expressive identities, developers of Hollow Knight chose to abandon relating to a human by making the main characters silent and decorative NPC characters with insect-like features. As you journey through Hallownest, players can assign their own meaning to the world and story since there's no prescribed identity. Both critics and gamers have given positive reviews on Team Cherry's Hollow Knight. Upon its release in 2017, nearly every gaming publication rated it highly. Awesome, beautiful worlds were created by Team Cherry. And as well as being a difficult game, it tells its story visually instead of via written language. Metacritic backs this up, with most gamers giving it a score of around 85 to 90. IGN and GameSpot both praised the detail in the artwork and the sheer enjoyment of exploring Hallownest. Many reviews highlighted that Hollow Knight is another game with a Dark Souls-type reputation, because of the game's challenges players face and the lack of hand-holding when it comes to navigating through the game. There are a number of gaming communities around the world that enjoy easier gaming, but the extremely challenging gameplay has caused many gamers to come back to the game over and over again. I'm one of those people. The game's fan community is still going strong. People keep sharing theories about the story, swapping tips, and making fan art and mods. Right now, I'm using the custom Knight mod with that fox skin. Just one example of how creative fans get. Even years after launch, the game keeps everyone talking. In Hollow Knight, the fallen kingdom of Hallownest was once a thriving underground civilization ruled by the Pale King, a higher being who brought intelligence and order to the insects who lived there. Under his rule, Hallownest became a powerful empire, filled with grand cities, secret temples, and loyal subjects. But this did not last. A mysterious force known as the Infection began to spread through the kingdom, corrupting the minds of its citizens and driving them into madness. Desperate to contain it, the Pale King created a vessel known as the Hollow Knight, a being meant to seal the Infection away forever. For a time, the plan seemed to work. The Infection was contained and Hallownest survived, but the Hollow Knight was not truly empty, and the seal eventually began to fail. As the Infection returned, the kingdom collapsed, leaving behind only ruins, ghosts, and forgotten memories. By the time the player arrives, Hallownest is a silent, decaying world. What remains is a mystery, waiting to be uncovered, piece by piece, as you explore the echoes of a once great civilization.